Welcome back to part 3 of our week 1 asynchronous dialogue digital lecture material for communication and cultural change. We're talking about television. This is Dr. Castleberry, and we're going to jump right back into questions from our students. We're looking at readings from Jason Mattel. We're looking at readings from several of our supplemental sources and some of the screenings that were recommended or required to students in week 1. Rachel has some comments about television and American culture, coming from the introduction, Why Television? Number 1, did the incident which occurred in the 2004 Super Bowl lead to award shows, in most cases, being filmed prior to its actual airing or broadcast? And if so, when was this change instituted? So you're talking about the infamous wardrobe malfunction, right? In the 2004 Super Bowl, sort of the contest between New England Patriots and the Carolina Panthers. That was a great back and forth game, a tug of war game. Ultimately, the second Super Bowl that would become a dynasty, right, for New England. And there was a bit of a tug of war also at halftime, right? We have this performance between Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson, right? Kind of a duo out there. They like to trot out multiple artists and then the song and rhythm, and then, yada, 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 wardrobe malfunction. And kind of a cutaway. We also got kind of a close-up, right? Close-up enough, it became the sensational, footage and all the grocery line tabloids and hot button. Here's an example of where a network got scolded by the FCC, and they'll put these numbers out there to make it sound like it's a big deal. They were fined $9 million. I'm making that number up, but it could be close to that. And you think, oh, shiver, oh my goodness. But let's fast forward. Let's see, almost 15 years. Les Moonves, the head of CBS, who has overseen they have been booming, raking in billions and billions for decades under his leadership. He gets in some hot water in the midst of what we blanket term the Me Too movement, right? Some inappropriate allegations surfacing about him. I guess there's enough behind those allegations. He negotiates a leave, and and they drag him through the tabloid mud and all that. And truth of the matter is, he left with like a payout, right? And the payout was in the 100 and 20, 50, whatever million dollars. Like, this is monopoly money, right? This is ludicrous. So what is a $9 million fine when like the head of your organization is tipping that on average or something, right? So when you get into that world of big business, these sorts of press releases about fines, it's more about making the public feel better so they can go back to watching their favorite shows on CBS without thinking twice about that, or going on to buying more albums from these artists. However, follow-up question is the okay. So we have the question about the tape delays and that sort of thing. There's typically only a 10 to 15 second tape delay, and that's pretty general. I think they say 10 or 15 seconds. And no, almost every award show and sporting event is still taking place live. In fact, they have to now, right? Because we've entered the social media age, right? The age of Twitter and live tweeting, and so everyone's out there live tweeting. If your product isn't running as close to live as possible, information about it is going to leak before the source has a chance to showcase it. So that's something to keep in mind. This book was written in 2008. I think our edition is 2010 or 12. We have recently emerged into a new decade. Is television still considered to be in the convergence era? And I would safely say yes, because we're converging all the time, especially with the advent of streaming services. So you think about how a streaming service works. you're pulling information, you're pulling TV content off of, it's being digitized, right? It's being digitally presented to you. So hence the term streaming, right? You're pulling it off of fiber optic or some kind of signal, and if it's in the context of you're watching it on television, all right, this is TV content coming to you from a different medium, from the internet. And so this is convergent model, right? This is spreadability activated. And if you're watching it on a tablet, on your laptop, on your phone, well, now we're just adding all those dimensions. Now we're really seeing it spread around. Yes, and then of course, if the content's popular, we're understanding the stickiness of it, and so it's about, technology, and television doesn't exist in its own vacuum that same way now. And for that matter, other mediums have done that. Film had already learned how to shift mediums. We don't watch everything on that's produced as a film in a theater. Theater attendance is either stabilized, but after 20 years of decline, right? But we watch it on demand. We're streaming it too. Or before the internet, films were rebroadcast on television. Or you have, other methods of distribution, via VHS tapes, DVDs, and so on. And so we see this medium hopping taking place. And that's what Henry Jenkins and others were talking about when they theorize about convergence culture, right? This is a crossover between mass mediums. They're not, if they ever were truly truly permanently separated from one another. Great questions. Television and American Culture, Chapter 5, Making Meaning. In sitcoms today, are live audiences still in high demand? I think we could say there's no shortage of audiences. A lot of times, audiences that get tours could even, have the opportunity to come in and sit in, see a taping. People are dying to kind of live that experience in a secondhand sort of way, right? It's a leisurely activity. It's something. It's like a notch on your belt, right? If you travel around, or there's no shortage, right? There's a shortage of shows that actually do tape in front of audiences. We could probably say that. Are voiceovers and laugh tracks more utilized? I mean, both, right? And infrequently, the laugh track kind of went out of fashion in the early 2000s. I think primarily we can look at when NBC was switching the types of shows it was focusing on. It went from the must-see TV era of your Friends, Seinfeld, Frasier, Will and Grace, and on and on and on, all the other supporting shows that are kind of coupled around them, and throughout the 90s, but definitely before that in the 80s. Sitcoms really popular in the 70s too, but in the early 2000s, you see something like The Office come on, and it removes the laugh track and changes up the camera work, and then all of the kind of copycats, whether they're successful or unsuccessful. And I'm not claiming Office is first, because it's not, but it's kind of a benchmark program like that. You've got your Parks and Recs, your 30 Rock, right? And so NBC rebuilt their programming to mimic a certain style, to advance the way these stories are being told and the way audiences are receiving them, right? It's a shift in genre technique and in production design, in all of these things, and that became a new norm. Think about, what is it, Modern Family is about to end its series, and it's been on for a long time, a decade at least, and these shows are kind of using that format. But we still have the traditional sitcoms too, and it's kind of like comfort food or junk food, and there's maybe a place for that, and people like the little laugh track sitcoms and the way that they're kind of set up. Okay. Are reality shows actually real and natural? How much editing is really done in quote-unquote reality shows? All right, do we really want to know the answer to this? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pause, give you time to stop this video. Just stop watching, right? Just come back to the next the next lecture series. And are we safe? Are you still there? All right. No, reality shows, spoiler alert, are not only heavily scripted, but they're heavily edited, right? The editing is sometimes rearranges the parts to enhance the quote unquote narrative that they're telling. You think about a show like Survivor, to rev up certain characters, to maybe cut out or diminish other characters that aren't as exciting. And but then shows like we've seen, some of these reality shows where they're absolutely scripted. They're not always, some of the competition ones not always scripted the exact way when we think of them as scripted, but even something like radio, right? Radio producers sit down, they write. They write copy. I mean, they prepare things. There is a lot of stuff that it can be ad-lib. There's room for expressive interaction and engagement. I mean, taking phone calls, but even that itself, those segments are scripted out. So, yes, television, the scripted era. And a lot of young writers are making good livings writing reality television. All right, last couple of questions here. Look like some questions from Simone, referring to Jason Mattel's Television American Culture, why television? How has the culture in the television industry changed since the 1970s? Well, I mean, just broad strokes, since how has it changed in 50 years? It's maybe arguably less toxic, arguably much closer to equal pay. There's maybe equal or more equal number of jobs. I hate to use the word equal on jobs. I think it's still like too many sectors kind of can skew in one direction at times, depending on the type of job. I know directors that still skews towards male, and that frustrates an enormous percentage, as you all can imagine. Certain jobs might skew female, but there's effort toward leveling that out. There's probably maternity leave instead of getting fired, right? That's something that's probably changed in 50 years. Title IX protections, I mean, broader audience appeal, as some of our docuseries have suggested. Okay, which television era had the biggest shift in technology? Ooh, this is an interesting argument, and I think a couple of decades stand out to me personally. I think an enormous shift is in the late 1960s when you see color. I think that's one of the all-time selling points of anything. The advent of color, right? When film went from black and white to color. I mean, it's a paradigm shift in the medium, in the artistic medium. Same thing for television, right? Television was black and white, if we didn't realize it, when it first emerged on the scene and it was popularized. But once it became full color, or at least primary colors, it was something to behold. And boy, did it beholden to audiences. I would suggest, however, though, this era of obsession and what many critics and scholars have defined as like peak TV or post-network TV, or the second golden age of television, or all these kind of labels we've given television in the 21st century. I would put, other people have other reasons, I would rank the number one rationale for that high definition. We moved into the era of high definition, and so you really did, and you could eventually affordably create that home theater experience, right? This is what Jean Baudrillard is talking about with others, right? With terms like the hyperreal, Guy Debord, the Society of the Spectacle, right? We're in activating this simulacrum, and we're living in this kind of endless aesthetic experience that is popular culture. And so, hey, what more reason to study about it? We're communicating about it and in it all the time. Why not learn how to take ourselves outside of that, critically reflect on it, and potentially be able to build it or deconstruct it, or what have you, right? Use it toward other ends, not be as used by it. So Last couple of questions here. Reflecting on the 60s. Hope some of you got to, if not all, got to check out that episode, right? The episode When Television Came of Age from Playtone Productions. Question 1, in what ways do you think television has urged the discussion of racial differences? And I would just quickly say, it's led to certain conversations television has, albeit slowly over time, like a slow crawl again, these kind of conversations of racial difference, while maybe stalling other aspects of social progress, right? So television loves to pat itself on the back and say it's moved us forward in culture. And in some ways it has, and it has slowly, and it's kind of intentional too. When you move things forward, when you progress a society too fast, you have civil unrest, right? You have, it becomes fragile, right? Not just fragmented, and there are pros and cons there, but talking about fragility, like and civil unrest, like to an unhealthy end. But television has played some role. Sometimes we maybe give it too much credit. Sometimes it, because it could do more, right? Or but when it has left a mark, it's indelible. It's memorable. What present day show would be a modern day Leave It to Beaver? I thought about this for a while, and I hope you all have great answers. I just thought about a show that's like 25 years old, Family Matters, right? In fact, I think it was 30 years old when it started, but it lasted almost a decade. But that's the 1990s. I mean, that's kind of like Leave It to Beaver, right? A nuclear family. Dad's relatively respected, or at least has a position, a profession of respect, and then a nerdy, annoying neighbor. Almost did an Urkel there. Skipped it. Why do you think the Twilight Zone has such a unique legacy? Well, it broke boundaries on what television could be, okay? And it brought up taboo topics under the disguise, right, of science fiction or horror. And so, the Twilight Zone, had that mystique about it. And we've talked about other things about, this is one reason Star Trek works time and time again, because they're using science fiction and future tense to really have allegorical reflections on the present, at least the better written episodes in their respective series. All right, and just one question from the Chapter 8, Television Pop Culture. How has interactive television transformed the way we, quote, watch TV, end quote? And I think this is a great open question for you all. How often do you just sit and watch television versus how often do you sit, turn on the TV, get on your phone, pull up the laptop, right, flick through the tablet, and so on, and you're not really watching TV. You have it as background noise, and you're doing other things, and your mental concentration is somewhere else. So that's why hopefully we'll have these strategic screenings recommended for you each week in here, and we're just try to give it that full focus so that you can gain new, opportunities of understanding, of interpretation, and then be able to kind of formalize your own thoughts by way of our genre analysis and some of those other items. This is an exciting course. We're going to be getting through so much together, and looking forward to this ongoing journey with you all in our communication and cultural change introduction to television studies. Thank you for hanging with us.